It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2019, regular meeting of the Board of Finance. Appreciate everybody coming tonight, 7:32 p.m. Okay, first item up for discussion is the approval of the suspense list, which we have done every year in the past. Kathy has sent around a memo with the suspense tax book and the various items that she's going to put in here. Would you care to give us a quick overview, Kathy? Welcome.
Sure.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I'm here tonight asking for the approval of the suspense list for Grand List 2014 of the $6.7 million and 20,600 motor vehicle, supplemental motor vehicle, and personal property accounts originally billed. There remains $18,973.39 and 106 accounts uncollected. This amount is considered uncollected, and therefore my request to be removed from the tax receivable on the town's books. Collection efforts will continue, and as you can see from the information I provided, this fiscal year we collected over $5,700 of previously suspended accounts. I also would like to point out that my request to suspend just under $19,000 is less than comparable municipalities of New Canaan, Ridgefield, and Wilton. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Well, I appreciate your diligence on this. I think the whole process in terms of not just how you designate the ones that are not collectible, but how you follow up on them, even after they've been put into suspense or taken off the books, is admirable. The fact that it was the $5,700 that you collected from amounts that had been previously taken off the books before?
Yes.
Right, so I would just applaud you for those kind of efforts and just encourage you to do more of that. It's a great service to our taxpayers because every dollar that you collect, and these are amounts that were legitimately assessed against these persons or entities, reduces the tax burden on everybody else, and every little bit counts. So thank you very much. Anybody have any comments?
I've heard Kathy come before us before. It's exceptional, and the effort. I mean, dunning people to get bill collected is a little bit more of an art than it is a science. But the drivers of what's outstanding, there were footnotes as to why, and we it's just a great job, Kathy. We've heard this report before, but it's serving us quite well, and that delta between the other comparable towns is quite substantial.
Yes.
Yep, that's great.
Would the other towns also use 2014 as the?
Ridgefield and Wilton do. New Canaan is more, I think they'll do a variety. They never got into suspending a particular year. They were actually going and suspending specific accounts from a variety of years, and they're moving towards doing it the way the other towns are doing it.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions for Kathy? Motion to approve? Rob, second. Paul? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kathy. We appreciate it. You, of course, can stay the whole time if you'd like.
Oh, God, no. Please.
Quite riveting.
Please.
Okay. Next up is a series of transfers. The first one is going to be for Public Works, and this pertains to some dredging work that those guys are doing. And we have Ed here to talk to us about this tonight. Ed, microphone's yours.
Thank you very much for having me tonight. Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works. I'm here tonight to obtain approval for the transfer that you have in front of you. It will be for the balance of the funds needed to dredge the sediment basin in front of the town hall here. Originally, this account was put together to include the obtaining of permits for the town hall dredging project, as well as the Gorham's Pond sediment basin just south of the bridge on Goodwise River Road. It also included in this account the actual dredging itself for the town hall sediment basin. The Gorham's Pond, the Friends of Gorham's Pond are putting the funds together to do the dredging down on Gorham's Pond south of the Goodwise River bridge. So originally, the estimate I put together back in 2016, I had used original soundings and depths to obtain a tonnage for sediment removal. After doing the design drawings, We found that that sediment basin was deeper than I anticipated. I take responsibility for using a lesser number. I should have upped it a little bit more, and I did not. So I'm here in front of you looking to transfer to establish the difference between our bids that we obtained and the funds I do have remaining in the account. I showed the balance of that at the bottom of the description for the transfer. I also included the low bidder number included, 335,000 plus. The company doing the work will be Sumco. They're out of Rhode Island if this transfer is approved. The other piece of this transfer goes back to the obtaining of permits and our design. When we first established this, there was an opportunity to do hydraulic dredging, sorry, which is a little bit different than the mechanical dredging I opted to go with. Hydraulic dredging wouldn't have required a call for dam. It wouldn't have required dewatering, substantial dewatering, and with that, my estimate was a little bit lower also. So with dewatering, with a coffer dam that the DEP requires us to put in to do mechanical dredging, which is what we're doing now, that upped the cost also. So I will tell you that I opted for mechanical dredging this time around, and I think the data that I had the last time this sediment basin was excavated and removed was back in 2007, I believe. The hydraulic dredging back then had caused such a disturbance and mess in the lower parking lot and on the other side in the park that I opted to go with a more controlled system and a more controlled design. And so mechanical, we're removing the sediment, trucking to this side, dumping it and staging it in this parking lot to dry for a short period of time, and then trucked off site to be disposed of at a approved location. The schedule for this is quite tight. We have an opportunity when the Mather Center is not being used. The parking lot is underutilized during the months of July and August and the beginning of September. The idea was to have the contract in place by this time, but I have the contractor on board and ready to go if this is approved, and if not, I'll find another avenue. But the option to move ahead is now just waiting on the funds to be put in place. So I have basically about 75 days to dredge that and remove it and then clean up the parking lot for it to be open and usable by September 9th.
I talked to Jamie Stevenson a little bit about this today. A couple of things came up from the discussion. One is the timeline that Ed mentioned in terms of when this was done last is of course correct. This is something that we need to do on a fairly regular basis, and what's interesting about this area, which is actually just over our shoulder here, is that waterway, or that extends over behind Crimmins Road and back over that way there. One of the things that's interesting about this is that particular spot that we're talking about is a town responsibility. But as this waterway, or this viaduct, I guess, moves along, the dredging responsibility actually goes to homeowners. And so one of the issues that we discussed on the call today, just because I'm familiar with that area, is what about that responsibility? Because some of those areas, that is in fact not being done by those homeowners. And there's one spot over there where the retaining wall is starting to fall, and that homeowner is responsible for that, and they're in fact not doing it. They're not taking the action that they're supposed to keep their section of that waterway clear. It's a little uncertain how much flooding and other issues would be mitigated if in fact this dredging were done consistently and on time and in the right way by all the folks who are responsible for it. One of the things we talked about was trying to have an education effort in the town to make people aware of these different waterways and aware of the dredging responsibilities, so that homeowners would be reminded of what they're supposed to do. And actually area residents that could potentially benefit from cleared waterways can be reminded themselves of what their neighbors are responsible for, so that they can pressure them to get those responsibilities fulfilled. But anyway, there's, I think, a broader issue here in terms of what to do on this. I think it's the right thing to do for the town to be dredging the part that it's responsible for, so I'm supportive of this, but we ought to consider it kind of a broader campaign to make everybody aware of not just dredging, but kind of where it needs to be done and who's really responsible for it, so that we have a complete approach to all of this. But the second thing that we discussed is that this dredging work needs to be done for both of these locations. one of the things we might ponder over the summer is whether we should consider establishing some kind of accrued reserve like we do for fire apparatus. This is the kind of thing that may in fact lend itself to this, because we got to get it done. The expenditures are not trivial, and it might be interesting to get the engineers come up, create something like a schedule that you'd have for fire apparatus, and just say, here are the different places in town where this dredging needs to be done. Let's actually think about what those costs are and try to spread them out over time, and we could maybe do that with some accrued funds to get that done. But for discussion later, I'm not saying we have to do that now, but Jamie actually brought up the idea, and I think it's actually one that's interesting that we should consider. Other questions for Ed or other reactions?
Is there any sort of proactive capital investment that we should be making to kind of prevent the sediment from building up, any type of like catch basin, or is there anything?
We do, as part of our MS4, if you will, general permit to the DEP, a requirement to street sweep 3 times a year, all the streets, and clean all of our catch basins at least once a year. And we do that. We've been doing that since I've started here, and there's records that go back that show it's been being done 3 or 4 years and starting when the program did. So almost 8 years now, they've been in full mode to handle that. That's generally where you get a lot of runoff now. A lot of the sediment goes to years of using sand on the roadways as an active ingredient to provide traction during the wintertime. They've now eliminated the use of any type of sand through the state, and the towns don't use it anymore. Either we use their salt or treated salt. So those are a couple ways that we've reduced a lot of the sediment getting into the rivers and streams. The other activity that's been going on is there are landscapers that tend to use that as an area to dump their debris or blow the debris, if you will, into it. And you'll see, if you come by, a lot of what I'm going to pull out of there is going to be leaf debris and stuff like that on the upper layers, if you will. An active maintenance program, I have it on our properties right now, which is our roadways, which pretty much are the main ingredient to what is dumped into those rivers. I think what we need to do is get out to the public a proactive approach on how they maintain their properties and what they should or should not be doing on those properties. The ones that generally abutting the rivers are the ones should be targeted more. Yes, sir.
I have 2 questions. What about Gorham's Pond? How does that fit into the budgeting and the like?
As part of this account when it was set up, my task was to get permits for both the Town Hall sediment basin here and the one at Gorham's Pond, the tip of Gorham's Pond, right at the Goodwise River Road Bridge. When I first started here back in 2015, I worked on the sediment basin just north of that bridge where we put the new dam and fish ladder in. That was my first taste of dredging in town of Darien. The second piece on Gorham's Pond is going to be just below that bridge. The next phase, and I think, it kind of wrapped itself around the comments that John had said, coming up with some type of reserve to start looking at the big picture dredging. Gorham's Pond is a big picture dredging. It's going to require a significant amount of funds and quite a lot of planning and some significant permitting. But that pond is asking for it to be dredged. You can just see it. It's not going to get better. It's not going to flush itself out. That's not how it works. The sediments do come and they do pile up. But these sediment basins, when they're cleaned and working properly and maintained on a more regular basis, will keep the Gorham's Pond from becoming worse. That's the whole idea. You catch it in these smaller sediment basins, you clean them out, don't allow them to get into the bigger water bodies that are affected tidally. Holly Pond's another one, same type of situation.
Is the cost basically based on the tonnage that you take out? Is that the primary metric?
It is. The coffer dams are a little expensive too, depending on how you set them up and the types that they use. But basically, you're using a large excavator to remove it, trucks to put it in a certain place, you let it dry, and then you haul it away. The longer you have an opportunity to let it dry, the more you can remove from it. Dry weight, wet weight is a big, big concern when you do dredging.
So then, is it something, if we had a reserve, that you'd want to do rather than every 12 years, be doing every 2 or 3 years and smaller?
I think maybe 3 to 5 years would be a good time. I think you still get a benefit out of doing it. There are processes through the DEP where you can get a certificate of permission that allows you to use your old DEP permit to go in and do the maintenance work, instead of what I had to do just now, which was go and get a full-blown permit again for this area.
Would we have the capability to create a regulation that would proscribe dumping into these areas, put up signs, assess fines for people who do that? Could we do that? And if we could, would it be helpful?
I think that conversation would be helpful to have, like Rich from EPC involved too.
Okay.
It's something that the wetlands and water courses are something that falls, and to be honest with you, I don't know if there's actually an ordinance or a fine system set up already, but I don't see why that wouldn't be something that could be beneficial to those streams and brooks.
Picking up on what John was saying about the individual homeowners, it seems incredibly inefficient to have individual homeowners taking responsibility for their own dredging. Is there any way to coordinate that, or?
It really depends on the type of stream or brook you're looking at. The upper dam that I did back in 2015-16, part of it was on private property, so part of it was funded by private funds. So I was able to actually use some of the steep money and some of the funds from the town to go in and do some work on private property, but that was a larger project. The sediment basin was quite large for an area that tight up there. I think what John was referring to was some of the streams that have restrictions along it that need maintenance, that may fall in and create blockages in the river. Some smaller basins, to me a smaller basin could be leaf debris, stick debris, things you can physically pull out of the river. But these type of sediment basins here, I haven't noticed a lot of them on private property, though I haven't seen them yet, but I know there are some that have been ignored. I don't know how the private owners go after funding to get that done. And when you start dealing with grants from the federal government or the state, you end up looking at labor rates differently too. Any funds from the state, any funds from the federal government, you have to use state labor rates. Privately funded donations that they go out and do their own dredging, you wouldn't. You get more bang for your buck that way. But it's still a lot of money to try to support a system.
Frank, was your point, like if we have neighbors that are like abutting the work that we're already doing, like approach them and say, listen, we can do this, and bring them in kind of pro rata to,
Yeah.
And it'd be cheaper for them, maybe.
yeah,
That's what I meant.
or the marginal expense, however you do
Yeah.
it.
So of the 135,000, you're asking for 47,000 or so from capital contingency. The rest of it's coming from sidewalks and the garage. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I worked with Jen on closing out a couple of the opened project accounts
Great.
that I had wrapped up projects on, the garage being one of them.
Yep.
And the commercial sidewalk was a project on the post road in front of the Grebes Pharmacy, if you will. That was the location for that funding, and we had money left over there. So we closed those two accounts out and were able to put it into this proposal for a transfer.
Okay.
And the 45,000, like for the garage, those weren't bond proceeds, right? Those were original?
Correct, that was capital non-recurring funds.
Other questions for Ed or comments? Okay, I'm supportive of this. I think it's part of maintaining town assets, just as we'd spend on a building or another asset. So motion to approve. Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Okay.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Ed.
very
That's
much.
terrific.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot. Okay, next transfer is one for the senior center for full-time to part-time salary. Jennifer?
When we developed the fiscal 19 budget, at that time, the senior center had a full-time chef. Then that person left. They have filled the chef position with someone who's actually defined as part-time. So we just need to move the salary dollars to where the position actually is.
I'm okay with this. Any questions or for Jennifer on this? Motion to approve? Paul, second. Senator? All in favor? Okay. Next one is from the youth director, Alicia.
I have to ask, are you related to Carrie?
That's my wife, yes.
Is she? I recognize a number of you from providing services to your children.
It's a constant struggle.
On your part or mine?
Both.
Both, right?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. I am requesting a transfer into our program account to, the youth department's primary or largest program that we sponsor is the summer camp program. 4 different programs. I have 325 individuals starting on Monday the 24th at 4 different locations. That includes a staff of 45. And we straddle the fiscal year. And we've danced that dance pretty deftly through the years, but over the past couple of years, it's kind of caught up with us. And so to close out this fiscal year, there is a shortfall to be able to get the program off the ground. The expectation of the client is pretty high, and I don't want to diminish the service that we provide. Some of the expenses that I have incurred, which is regularly, I've had to pay for a couple of the trips, for instance, that we take for the next fiscal year out of this. But that's been the pattern over the past number of years, so it's not an anomaly. But at any rate, that is why I'm here.
Terrific. How does revenue figure into any of this?
Revenue is up
Okay.
again this year, the summer camp program. Currently, the revenue for the 4 programs is at $258,000. Last year it was at $251,000. Enrollment is at an all-time high, consistently increasing.
My question was a little bit different, which is, if you have these increased program expenses, is it that you're providing more capacity and that, in fact, revenue is higher than budgeted as well? Or is this just simply some added expense to get you over either the fiscal year or just some extra expenses you didn't anticipate?
I would say it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Revenue is up. The enrollment is up, the staffing is up, and therefore that drives expenses as well.
Okay. Questions?
Geez,
for Mr. Collins?
John, I can't help myself, and this is nuts. You know, I normally don't talk about items that are this small, but I just want to make sure that through the budget process, you have actually made this case on the trend with the Board of Selectmen, because it looks like we just didn't do very good budgeting, if I may.
Fair enough. I've worked with Kate and with Jen to address that concern. You know, it is kind of an interesting sort of challenge, if you will. You know, I'm responsible, as we all are, for creating a budget in early winter, late fall of 2018 for a program that's going to be running from 2019 to 2020. So it's really based on past that I build the budget, partially build the budget. Trends, enrollments, revenues, expenses. You know, I didn't anticipate a year and a half ago that I would be in this position. I don't know if that speaks to what you're
It does.
expressing.
We need to double down and hope it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think to Jamie's point, anything you could do to identify where the discrepancy was in your budget strategy that came up with these numbers, and just change that if you can. That obviates the need for you to come and see us, as much as I know you enjoy that. So, other questions about this? Okay, I'm supportive of this. It's a great program, and I understand it. Motion to approve. Paul, second. Rob. All in favor? Great. Okay, thanks so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
We appreciate it. Okay, last transfer is Registrar of Voters. This is $13,000 out of contingency to cover extra expense.
Right, this is for the elections portion of their budget, which every year we either budget if we know that there's gonna be a primary, or we don't budget and we expect to transfer from contingency. They did a fairly good job budgeting for the primary that we had, but they had some serious ballot printing expenses that really tank them. They had to, I think there was a change in candidates, and at the last minute, they had to then reprint the ballots, and the fact that it was a 2-page ballot caused problems. So they were able to cover other election overages within their budget, but they cannot fully cover this.
A couple of questions. One is, seems kind of late. Here we are, June, getting this from a November election. Was there a reason for that, that it's coming so late? And I also seem to recall we've approved some other expenditures to cover voter registrar since then. Maybe this was last year, and I'm just thinking too far back.
Yeah, there was the voting booths, but not for the actual running of the elections.
Okay, so something separate. But anyway, is there a reason this is coming so late?
Kind way.
We're trying to get the department heads more engaged in reviewing their budget
Okay.
and taking responsibility for reviewing and managing and administering their budget. So part of-
Still work to do, I take it? Okay.
Yeah, so
just
part of
checking.
it was just kind of letting things run and see if somebody needed prompting.
Okay, well, Exhibit A, they needed prompting.
So what's a program expense?
That's a very broad category. Every department has program expense, or almost every department has a line item. So Alicia has it, and she uses it for summer camps, for her other youth programs. The registrars, they use it as a catch-all kind of for ballot printing. They use it for, I think they may use it for the police extra duty that have to staff the polls. It's a very broad use.
If they were to budget it or track it, maybe in a couple different sub-accounts, would they be able to, you better kind of create the budget going forward? Because if they're just trying to predict program expenses next year to be what they were this year.
No, when we switched to OpenGov, we used OpenGov for budget development for the fiscal '20 budget. And what we had line itemization within Munis, but a lot of that would carry over from year to year. We found that people weren't reviewing it as much. When we moved to OpenGov, we wiped out all the history that was there and had people build it from zero and say, what am I going to, in program expense, what am I going to spend my money on? Ballot printing, how much do I think it's going to be? Police extra duty, how much do I think it's going to be? So I think we weren't perfect in how all the departments did that, but the plan is again next year to now build off of what itemizations they have in there, have them reviewing it earlier, putting more thought into it, putting it into the context of what did I actually spend this year on those items. So I think we will have better building of the individual line items going forward.
Do they anticipate any other expenditures that will need to be covered, or are we done?
In the elections section, no. I was speaking with John Vesey today, and he does expect some within their registrar, the registry section.
So a transfer before the end of this fiscal year to get that cleaned up? Any
Most
sense of
likely.
what that is or not?
I
TBD?
don't know.
Okay. All right, this is understandable to me. Any other questions for Jen on this one? Motion to approve? Frank, second. Rob? All in favor? Okay. All right, good. Okay. So we're going to talk next about the bond appropriation and authorization for the Oxford Elementary School. We're a little out of sequence in our discussion of this. We've talked about it before, but actually the process was reversed this time. As everyone I think knows, the bonding resolution and appropriation actually went to the RTM and was approved by them. So our approval actually is coming after rather than before, which is the usual order of worship for that. And so just as a refresher, the reason for this authorization at this time, even though we don't have a fully priced out project, was that we needed to have appropriated funds in place in order to apply for state grants to support this project. As we've discussed on the building committee, those grants, if we get them, are non-trivial. These are important parts of funding for this project, and we need to do everything we can to make sure we take full and complete advantage of those grants. And so there's a lot more wood to chop on that, but a big part of this was making sure that we had appropriated funds for this entire project to even be able to apply for them. We could have waited, but there's only one time a year that we can apply for these grants, and if we waited, we would actually have to wait until a year from now to apply. and it would have delayed the project and created other problems. So we decided to go this route. The 60 million, the 63 million that you see here, that we believe is going to be more than sufficient to cover the cost of the entire project. In other words, I don't expect that the building committee will have to come back for an additional appropriation, recognizing that we still have some design work and a lot of other things to do to finalize that figure. But certainly this amount that's appropriated, we expect to be enough, and it does cover what we need to do for applying for these grants. Jim has, in addition, taken a look at some of the bonding requirements and has a good sense of debt service and a few other aspects of this that we could also consider. Jim?
Yeah, if you guys look at the like the one pager that Jen printed out, on the top left, you can see that what we've looked at is the analysis of bonding 58 million. It's basically the $63 million sort of high estimate for the cost of what the project could be, less I think it's 10.7% of eligible costs. So in this case, they're assuming about a $5 million grant that we could see from. It's not 5%. It's not 10% of all costs. It's 10% of what the cost deems to be what the state deems to be necessary.
So the grants apply only to expenditures that are approved for purposes of calculating this grant. So it's not going to be the entire project, but the amount that Jim has in there that's netted against this, that shows the actual bonded amount, is a zip code estimate of what those grants would be.
So, the anticipation of which things could be done differently, and we could combine them with other capital projects and so forth, but we broke this up, working with Jen suggested we break this up into kind of 4 different bond deals. And the reason being is that you generally need to spend the funds that you raise via bond proceeds relatively soon after actually raising them, or you can just use them to reimburse yourself. So we've shown 4 different bond deals of $3 million for the design phase, which we could do as early as like beginning of next year, and then splitting up the project costs into 2 $24 million bond deals, and then a final $7 million for the demolition and kind of clean up and regrading of the property.
Right.
What I would show you is on the bottom graph. I think it's kind of easiest to look at it, on the graph side. You can see the blue debt is our existing debt service, which is about $10.6 million per year now. That includes both principal and interest, and you can see that it comes down over time as our principal balance and interest cost comes down. The red is the debt service for the new deals, which, because each deal is assumed to be done approximately a year after the last deal, it sort of staggers into the debt service. So you can see in the chart in the bottom left, you can see the debt service in the first year is 84, then 700,000, then 1.6, and it kind of ramps up to a sort of a run rate of 4.2 million. One of the key assumptions here is that when we bond these 4 debt deals, that we would have no principal until the 36th month. And then on the 3rd anniversary through the 20th anniversary, we would have kind of level debt service thereafter. And so if you look at, again, like the new debt service schedule on the bottom left-hand sort of schedule of numbers here, the run rate of 4.2 million of debt service that we would see, that's after we've completed all the bonding. And you can see in the back end, it sort of trails off. The other pages that are included in here, in the package that Jen sent around, show all 4 different bond deals sort of laid out. But I think the takeaway here is that if rates stayed the same, and if this timing worked out, and if we choose to bond it with 0 principal for the first 3 years and level debt service thereafter, we can actually layer in $58 million worth of bonding without driving up the amount of debt service that we pay every year. In fact, it would continue to come down, and therefore, as a percentage of the budget, of the overall sort of budget, the amount that debt service takes up would kind of continue to come down. So it gives us, it spreads out and decreases the effect on the taxpayer, and it gives us additional bonding room should we need to kind of undertake more capital projects.
And so the Oxbridge School debt service that starts in fiscal 21, that $84,000, excuse me, the $84,000 is interest, and you're not actually starting principal repayment until the following year, 22? Or is that actually starting in fiscal 23 on this chart?
Yeah, so for instance, like the first $3 million,
Yeah.
that's the $84,000 is related to just that deal.
Got it.
So and in fact, it's only 6 months of interest
Okay.
on that $3 million.
Well, I like this because you'll see that we've got debt service in fiscal 20, 21, and 22 that's still in excess of $10 million. And the debt service on this schedule, the way Jim's created it, really doesn't start to get substantial until fiscal 23, when our town debt service starts to drop off substantially. And you can see that in the blue graph on the chart that he's provided. So in terms of our overall strategy of trying to incorporate or layer in this debt in a way that allows us to responsibly renew town assets while not creating a debt service bubble that is disruptive to taxpayers. I think this actually matches up perfectly with that strategy, so that's great.
So one thing I would say is if you look on that top, this portion of the graph right here, you'll see the $60 million of current debt that we have outstanding. You can see how that comes down. And you can see in the middle one, it shows sort of how that $58 million worth of debt sort of funds up. It starts at 3 and it only goes to 57, right? Just because we're paying down a little bit of principal at the same time. But on the fourth column from the right, you can see our debt balance of $60 million. You can see it only hits a high of 85 million under this bonding program, and then it continues to come down. So even under the old, debt service policy that we had, which was trying to be below $100 million, we're not crossing that. And as a percentage of debt service, as a percentage of the total budget, we continue to, stay in that kind of 7% to 8% range.
And Jennifer, our debt balance at the end of fiscal 19, that $60,379,000, that's where we'll be
Yes.
at the end of this June. Okay. Questions
John,
on this? or for Jim?
I read all of this with great interest. Just so I understand what our discussion has been, we are running these sensitivity analyses simply to conform with the debt policy that we did last summer. Is that correct?
Well, correct. I mean, I think the strategy here is twofold. One is to layer in debt service in a way that doesn't materially change the shape of that curve, which I think this does. Second, in terms of having the separate debt, in other words, 4 bonding issues instead of 1, that's simply consistent with the cash flow requirements of the project as opposed to really anything else, if I have that right.
Let me repeat. I understand that. So we're using, and the timing of these, given the nature of the timing of the projects, we're using this. This is our first chance to apply the debt policy standards to some scenario analysis so that we conform with that. That it also falls within the $100 million limit to boot is a nice thing to know. But we no longer hold that as the basis for the debt policy.
I mean, we did a $3 million debt deal in, was it March or April? April. And I mean, that was after we sort of, looked at the debt policy of looking at debt service as a percentage of the whole budget. I think saying that we should keep that, below 10%. We're at sort of low 7% right now. But yes, this is.
No, I just want to make sure we go through this exercise, that this is guidance to stay within the boundaries of that debt policy. I just want to commend everybody that we're having this discussion.
That's great.
This discussion did not happen hypothetically. This is based on the constraints that we as a group approved last summer, and I think that's great. Just want to say this is a good applied use of those standards.
Point of curiosity, Jennifer, since this project is now actually fully appropriated, what will our process around adopting resolutions for this bonding, how will that be different, if at all? In other words, will we simply come to the point where the cash is needed and we'll plan bonding appropriately and you'll provide the resolutions at that time? Is there anything more to it than that?
That's about it. Once they can get further into the project and really have a sense of timing and cash flow needs, we'll take another look at our initial thought of the 4 issues. But as I like staying on the February schedule because part of it was we were trying to get that principal balanced later into the year, so a few more issues will get us more balanced. So probably late fall, we'll start, each late fall for the next couple of years, we'll take a look at where we stand on cash flow, where the project's going, and that's when we would come to you with our financial advisors multiple scenarios that then also show the different metrics that we've talked about, and at that point, you'll make a final decision on the structure of each individual issue as it comes before you.
Good, good. Yeah, that's what, that was my follow-on question, which is great. Thanks for saying that, Jennifer. That we are suggesting that first $3 million have no principal, and that we do not repay principal until the 4th year, is the suggestion.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, we'll have to decide at the time, depending on,
With a
what
lot
cash
of
flow is gonna
different
look like, but-
factors, the
But
market,
that's the-
financial
yeah,
that's the
advisors,
theory of the
guidance.
case.
Right, so again, this remains guidance.
Yeah, but consistent to your point about sort of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Good.
And remember,
Yep.
the vote today is really just the appropriation resolution.
Yep.
We're not making any bonding
Understand.
decisions at this meeting.
So this doesn't have
Francis?
to go back to the RTM, right?
No, they have already done their part. So
Yes.
once, if you approve this, 10 days from now, the appropriation becomes effective, and then we're
There's
done.
a ton of stuff that we
Right,
can move
so
forward
we
with
have additional steps to take, but they don't have additional steps
Right.
to take.
for the duration of this project,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. Now, we'll keep them informed as a courtesy, but no, they have no further role.
And we've seen very rough numbers on kind of additional school projects that are likely to come down the pike, right? And they would get us over the 100 million.
I don't think we have anything that large.
I don't
It's a good
think so.
question. I don't, not,
I mean,
well, within
I
the,
don't- I'm not objecting, don't get me wrong, but,
well, we did more than 15, it would bring us over 100.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you look at,
I think it is more
if you look
than
at the
15.
total debt service that we pay, right now, it's about $10 million as a percentage of a $145 million budget. You know, we're still well under the sort of that 10% threshold.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
you raise a good question, though. I'm just trying to think, do we have $15 million in school or really any other debt or capital expenditures that
The
are coming up?
large one on the town side is the Pear Tree Point project, where there's a building committee for it. They haven't brought forward, they're still in design and planning. They haven't brought forward a request for construction dollars, but that would rise to the level of bonding and be a significant amount.
2 or 3 million. it's
Yeah,
not
just
10
a
or
couple
million,
million.
right. Yeah, so you take that, I don't think we're doing anything, it's a good question, Frank. I don't know if our debt would actually get over 100 or not. We should look into that. It's a great question, actually.
I think
I don't know.
I couldn't help but notice, by the way, the size of the project is significant. Again, I'm here to support the project. I don't
Oh,
want to
yes.
complain. The high school was financed in, I don't remember the year, but it's
No,
12 years
506,
ago, I'm
something.
guessing, something like that. I think it was 75 million, 76 million. I know it was a historic number for a single building in the state, followed by Tokenique. It's a big number on a per square footage basis, on a discounted NPV. It's an expensive school.
No doubt.
Yeah, I would think that the high school number on a per square foot basis would be a lot less than.
Apparently, I'm
Yeah.
just
Keep-
taking a basic ballpark.
keep in
Using a
mind that-
discount rate of 3%, it looks like it's really expensive.
Yeah, keep in mind, the other strategy with this building is that we are not coming up with a number that's constrained and then letting the team go off and design it and see a bigger number and then value engineer that number back down to what we originally planned. It really is anticipated that this $63 million is vastly more than, not vastly, but considerably more than what we're going to need to do this project. But we definitely don't want to have a building that's value engineered, that has critical elements or critical capacities removed from it to satisfy some false notion of what the building should cost. And so we're going to make sure that this building incorporates everything that is required, not just in terms of Board of Ed specs, but in terms of capacity and layout and all of that. So it really is an enduring building in the future that does not require further expenditure. So anyway, more to come on that. But I think this is clearly an investment in the town's future as well as the education of our children. I think we have an excellent building committee and process for making sure that that gets done. And I think this appropriation is a key part of that next step. So I, as a member of the building committee, I'm certainly supportive of it. So any other further questions or comments?
What date does this resolution all the funding package have to be sent to the state to get into the next funding cycle?
Well, we need to vote on this today. The resolution is, as Jennifer says, becomes effective 10 days from now, which is then is the catalyzing point that all of this can be sent to the state. I'm not quite sure the exact timing after that.
What is it, by June
But it's
30th?
due by June 30th,
Right.
yeah.
And keep in mind, like, there was a lot of capital investment, like if this school was not rebuilt, there's a lot of sort of pending capital investment, I think that would need
That
to be.
we've deferred.
Yeah, we've deferred and would
Right.
need to be done on that school, so it's, I mean, it's not
Significant.
Yeah,
63, but it's significant.
good deal.
I do have one last
Sure.
question, John. So last time we met, I think Kip came in front of us as a committee, and I thought the number was high 40s, low 50s. So how did we go from, let's say, 50 to 63? What changed in the last month? And am I completely wrong from my recollection? 'Cause-
So they've talked about numbers like that, but the 63 million was the first time that they'd really got their minds around the various components, had a chance to test it a bit and get comfortable that that's really going to be enough to cover the entire project. I remember talking about 50 million a year ago when people were just throwing around numbers based on sort of more than Tokenique, but less than a high school, and then they picked a number. This one is a lot more serious and I think complete and really will be the number that we can work towards and be confident is sufficiently large as an appropriation to cover the cost of the school. Keep in mind that there's a lot more complexity with this particular project than we've had in the past, simply because building regulations and state standards have advanced. There's all kinds of environmental performance that we need to get out of this facility that we have not had in previous years, as well as just lots of requirements to support students. Keep in mind also that this school is going to house the early learning program, and so there's a dimension to that that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so since that 50 million number was bandied about, all of that's been baked into this, and so I think what you have here is something that's a lot more thorough, but that's a high-level explanation of how we got here. Other questions? Okay, big number, but an important one. Motion to approve. Jim, second. Paul? All in favor? All right, thank you.
Hey, John, can I just ask a question on bonding?
Please.
I noticed there was a small change made to the Highland Farms bonding resolution where, I mean, they just sort of struck a word.
Yeah, the
Do-
comfort station.
Do we need to re-vote on that?
No, they're the final say on that. So because they've amended it, that's what has been approved. No comfort station.
Okay, financial report, Jennifer.
I've highlighted a couple of items on the revenue side, the town clerk revenues and the building permits. We've been keeping an eye on those throughout the year. Town clerk, I think we're gonna be about $200,000 under our budget. And the building permits, we had about $750 in there for redevelopment projects. We do not expect those permits to come in. So my projection on building permits is about $1,165,000 versus the $2 million budget that's in there. If the permits don't come in this year, they will come in next year, and we do have them in the budget for next year as well. On the expenditure side, one item I wanted to call your attention to is on page 3, emergency medical service. It's a quarterly payment paid in arrears, and I do expect that we will have a transfer. We're about $4,000 over related to the paramedic contract. And they did change their billing company. There was a lag in getting collections up and running, but we are seeing better collection numbers coming in. So we won't know this until they get their June billings into us. So we'll know in July what our transfer is going to be. The last 3 months of our fiscal year tend to be higher activity months. So I think it won't be a huge transfer, but we can expect it.
So this is driven by a miss in terms of collections as opposed to a misbudgeting for our contractual obligation with this is Stanford.
With Stanford EMS, we are contractually required to pay them $100,000 per quarter. What we get from billings or from collections goes towards that, and then the town pays the difference each quarter.
Okay.
I thought historically, like, we'd actually been collecting I thought the revenue that we were collecting from the billings actually exceeded the 100,000.
They have not in the time of the contract. We were getting closer. But then with their change to a different collection agency, we saw a drop off in collections while they were going through that transition. But we've had to pay every quarter since we've had the paramedic contract.
Okay. And the $855,000 draw, which was for this wiring project for the Board of Education, can you remind me where fund balance will stand at the end of the, well, next meeting,
Yes.
we'll talk about that. I just want to make sure we're staying on top of that number. I remember this draw, but I can't remember where that causes to end up on fund balance and then as a percentage of budgeted revenue.
Right, and the 855 is for the wiring project, which is 355, and then what's also shown here is the 500,000 that you approved through the budget process.
That's right.
It
Yep.
falls into
Yep.
this fiscal year.
To actually take fund balance down, that's right, okay. Anyway, maybe a refresher in July in terms of where we ended up on fund balance would be good. Do you have a sense for how the year's going to turn out?
I think we're gonna have some pretty decent surpluses on the expenditure side. I think we'll have a little bit of a draw on fund balance from result of operations. The big unknown is Board of Education. They received, about $1 million more in special ed, well, not quite $1 million more, about $700,000 more for excess cost reimbursement.
Okay,
We do not yet know how much of that will be coming back to the town.
okay.
Taking them out of the equation, I expect on the town side we'll have a slight draw on fund balance, but I don't think it'll be significant, and it'll be driven by, I think, the building permit revenue
Right.
shortfall.
So when you said surplus on expenses, you meant over budget?
Under budget on expenses.
Yeah, so but that's not enough to offset the revenue.
Right, I don't think we'll be
shortfall.
more under budget on the expense side than on the revenue side.
My only other question was on the active bonded projects page, slide 11. There's still some cash surplus and deficit figures in there. It looks like they're all surplus figures. I'm just wondering what the ultimate disposition of those figures will be.
So the DPW garage clocks lane are complete, and we did what we did in our last bond issue was we had to borrow some in case we did not receive a premium, and we had to cover issuance costs. We did receive a premium, we didn't have to charge issuance costs to these individual projects. So the 7,400 and the 5,000 can be reallocated. Those are known numbers that can be reallocated to another authorized bond project. The high school cafeteria, I just need to go through and reconcile that account, make sure that our records reflect everything and that everything's been processed. So about a $50,000 surplus there that will also be able to be allocated to an authorized project. Oxridge land acquisition, I just have to make sure that with Kate, she's done with all of her engineering or any other professional services on that one.
Okay.
So any cash surpluses that do remain, we can apply to another project that's active, authorized for bonding, and borrow that much less on the project. One item that we've been carrying along is the high school shed. There is still nothing spent to date, and I've heard that the Board of Ed might be relooking at that. I've heard that perhaps they want to have a bit more of a plan of different storage facilities. I don't know if that's true, but if that is the case, my recommendation would be that we close out the high school shed, remove the authorization, and let them come to us again with a plan instead of trying to work with the shed and
I think that's a
cobble
great
things
idea,
together.
actually, Jim, you'd agree with that? No,
Yeah.
I think that's something we should do. And how much is on 250,000?
And they haven't drawn any of it.
None.
Okay.
All right, so could we vote at this meeting to rescind that authorization?
We actually need a resolution that removes the authorization, so I'll have that for you in July.
Okay.
Does it need Board of Ed approval? We shouldn't move on
We should let
that.
them know that,
Yeah,
that we're
we
doing
shouldn't
that.
move on that without.
Yeah,
It
no,
did seem like
that's
they,
totally fine.
at one of their facilities meetings, it was discussed, and it sounded like they were going to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
So what we can do on our side is try to confirm with the Board of Education that they're not moving forward on this project, and if that's the case, I'll bring a resolution to you in July.
That's great, because then we
get rid
just
of
take a
that.
fresh look when they're ready to go.
Yep.
I think that's fine.
I think even if they're moving forward with just something that's very different than what was originally
We should take a
envisioned.
fresh look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they can't use these funds for anything other than a storage facility at the high school.
Right.
because that is how the resolution is written. So if they need more somewhere else, less here, they don't have the flexibility the way that resolution's written.
Okay. Anything else on that, Jim? You'd mentioned something else, I forget now what it was. That was something related to this, or maybe it was just the surplus funds from the cafeteria.
Yes,
project, which-
surplus,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine.
So do we need a resolution to move any
No,
of
we
those
just need to ask
surpluses?
her to come up with a resolution. We'll do that next month. Yep.
Well, on the surpluses, for active projects, we have Oxford Elementary School.
Yep.
We have Highland Farm, that's not yet bonded, but will be effective, and we have Hindley roof replacement. Do you as a board have any preference where we reallocate those already issued funds?
I don't. Do you have a recommendation? I mean, I don't actually. Do you
question
have a
is,
recommendation?
Well, can I ask you a question? If we were, it has to be a bondable expense,
Yes.
right?
Right.
There has to be something that, at the time that we reallocate, has an active bond authorization.
I'm open to suggestions. What would you like to do?
I'm kind of partial to the Hindley roof replacement,
That's 500,000?
500,000.
Okay.
I don't think it really makes a difference, I think that they might get going on the Hindley roof replacement a little sooner than Oxbridge really gets cranking.
Right.
So.
I'm fine with
That would be
that.
my recommendation.
No.
Okay. Do we need to?
But all of these projects, given that they've been approved, even though we haven't bonded, they can still start spending, right?
Yes.
Well, partly because these funds are available, right? Right. Do you need a motion or vote from us on this?
That will be another one that I have to get a resolution from bond council, so
Okay.
we have the appropriate word.
All right. That all sounds fine. Any further comments on the financial report from you, Jennifer? Any questions for Jennifer?
The special ed number final,
Yes.
73.5?
Yep, that is money in the door, and we have received all we're going to receive.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We have a whole stack of minutes
Do we,
to go through. So,
No man minutes.
No, I didn't get around to getting those out to Diane.
right, well, she was doing the minutes from 2004, so we had to kind of go through all that.
yes, I think
And
we.
You guys have
fortunately-
a lot of meetings in March and April.
Well, fortunately, we're on live TV, so think about our viewers tonight and just how riveting this is, so, okay. I've actually read through all these carefully. There are some here and there edits. I actually had no major edits on any of these. Diana and I think the
Yeah, yeah.
folks who prepared these actually look pretty good. I don't know if anybody has had a chance to go through them in detail as well, or whether you had any significant changes.
We all provided comments before.
Yeah, before, so I don't think there's anything further to do, unless anybody found something.
I have one, John.
Please, which
But
one?
I can hand over my edits.
What date?
Jamie Stevenson misspelled and so on, that kind of a thing. The J-A-Y. Let me just rifle through these, John. I do have one. Yeah, there's a second one. All right, hang on, almost.
To the third one.
So, John, here's a technical matter, and we're going to be skipping ahead. On April 11th, sorry, everybody, on April 11th, on page 2, reference, and by the way, the minute keeper largely did a great job. I want to make sure that's clear on all of these.
Yep.
But on page 2 of the 11th, there's reference to bond ratings, and we should stay consistent. The convention for Moody's is a large A, small a for AAA. S&P and Fitch use all caps. So, referencing the bond ratings here, we don't mention any of the services, so
These are all Moody's ratings, correct?
Yes.
if they're Moody's, then they all should be, the convention would be capital A, small cap A, small cap A.
And I see that shown in one spot, so maybe we'll change
the,
that to the
Here's,
right.
on April 4th, as I'm skipping around, and I it was a testy exchange that I had with my friend Joan Hendrickson. and I'm not sure what word choice I want to use, but on page 2 of April 4th, final sentence, Ms. Hendrickson then spoke about short-term investment fund and its colorful history for the state of Connecticut. I would recommend we delete the word colorful.
Done.
And last, John, and I've got a couple others where there's some spellies, no worry. Last thing, and this is on the first one, March 12th. Is it our, do we normally list all of the people that attended and spoke?
At a public hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Do we list them in the format of the minutes at the outset? Caught that.
so I did these minutes myself for years, and I looked back in time, and I didn't really see any consistent format or approach to that. And so I don't know that there's anything in particular prescribed for that.
Okay.
It's a good question. The way she has it here is actually a copy of the handwritten
I
list.
just raised that as a matter of whatever the practice has been. You're familiar with it. I think that looks fine. Then the last comment, and this is maybe the most sensitive of them all, with my esteemed chair. On page 2.
I'm sorry, where are you?
Of March 12, page 2.
Okay.
There is a discourse that begins the paragraph at the bottom of page 2. In conclusion,
Yes.
Mr. Zagrodzky said, and it continues for, it's a total of 6 paragraphs.
Yes.
I thought what you had to say was terrific, but I'm not sure it was. Should that be contained in the public hearing record? My recommendation was to condense it to 1 paragraph. Mr. Zagrodzky spoke eloquently, if not mellifluously, and said 1, 2, 3, 4 items.
I think the only reason that it's in there is similar to why Mr. Sini's comments are expanded on page 1, is that Mr. Sini and I were the only ones who did not have prepared remarks, whereas everyone else did, and their prepared remarks are actually included as part of the record. So I think that's why.
Okay.
Could this actually be condensed down to a paragraph?
Not to worry.
Totally.
Your argument is logical, if
Well,
not persuasive.
I could certainly convert mellifluousness, if that's
Thank
the
you.
right word, to brevity.
Yes.
So maybe that type of strategy could work. Right? Or economy. I could do economy, those 2 words. I will take that under advisement.
And I'll hand you the other edits I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, why don't we march through and do an approved as edited for each one of these minutes to get our votes right, unless anyone have any other comments? Okay, we will start with March 19th. So Frank, you and Paul were not there. So do we have a quorum for those minutes? Me, Jim, and Rob. Yes, we do. So March 19th, motion to approve as amended. Jim and Rob. Rob seconds. All in favor? Okay, so 4 to 0 to 2 abstentions.
We have the 12th, we're going like in order.
I'm sorry, what?
If we're going like in date order, we have the 12th.
I just did the, oh, I'm
You
sorry.
did the 19th.
I'm sorry. We have done the 19th. I meant to do the 12th. Thank you. This one, we were all here except Diana, so we can vote on those. So motion to approve March 12th minutes as amended. Paul, second Jim. All in favor? Okay, 6 to 0. All right, that is the 12th and the 19th. Next is the 26th. I was not here and Jim was not here, but the rest of us, you can approve that. So motion to approve as amended the March 26th minutes. Paul and Rob, all in favor? Okay, 4 to 0 and 2 abstentions. The April 2nd minutes, everybody here except Rob. Motion to approve April 2nd as amended. Frank, Jim, second. All in favor? 5 to 0 to 1 abstention, that would be Rob. April 4th, everybody here except Rob and Jim. Motion to approve April 4th minutes as amended. Senator, and Frank is a second. All in favor? Okay, 4-0 to 2 abstentions. April 11th minutes, the last ones. Everybody here except Diana. Motion to approve April 11th minutes as amended. Jim, second. Rob, all in favor? 6-0. Okay.
Speaking of minute takers,
John, do you want these other little edits?
Yes, I just actually handed them to Jennifer. We'll take those.
is something going to watch it on TV?
Yeah, they'll do it from Virginia.
There's some edits for you. Okay, almost done here. Special assignments or committee reports, audit, cafeteria. I don't have anything to report. I guess I'll start with the building committee for Ox Ridge. We, as you know, selected the architects. We've also selected the construction firm that's going to help us. And I think we've got an excellent combination for all that. All that process is well underway. The big thing is being able to advance with the grant process, which we'll be able to do after this vote today, but I've got a lot of confidence that that group is moving forward with alacrity. So it's all good. Audit or any other comments or from other committees?
I think the Pear Tree Point Committee, did Diana pass anything along?
Yeah, the only
Because they
thing.
have been meeting.
They have been meeting. The only thing is I got a note from some folks on that committee that wanted to sit down and discuss the budget process so that when they get to a point that they're ready to spend money. So I'm actually meeting with one of those gentlemen and Diana for breakfast on Friday to go through that process with them. So they're, again, moving along, and I think we'll have a good outcome there. Chairman's report, I don't have anything else other than the Ox Ridge Building Committee, but I think we're in good shape there, so I don't have anything to report there. Does anyone else have anything for the good of the order? Okay, I think we are done. Motion to adjourn. Jim, second. Jamie, all in favor?
Couple of it.
Oh, thank you.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, friends.